Welcome to HP Tuner's GM Gen 5 training part 42. In this training module, we're going to be exploring how we can dial in both of our airflow modes, so mass airflow and speed density, at the same time using our closed loop operation, so idle and part throttle cruise. This is going to be speeding up our calibration process greatly rather than going into each individual airflow mode and calibrating it. We can do both at the same time. We've talked about this briefly in our last tutorial, so now we're going to be jumping in and implementing the actual calibration process from start to finish on our test vehicle. We have a lot to cover. Let's jump in so we can check this out.
Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at how we can dial in our mass airflow and our virtual volumetric efficiency at the same time. This is going to be cutting down our calibration process greatly. We don't have to go into each individual airflow mode and set the engine control module into a MAF failed state or a high-speed mass airflow only state. We can do this together by using the math channels and the histograms that we've talked about in our last training module. Let's go and talk about that real quick, and we'll come in here and talk about what I've prepped in this file that we're going to be working with here, and then we'll go capture a data log and then start to review the calibration process. Usually 2 to 3 revisions, you can get things nailed down pretty well. So let's go and take a look at the VCM scanner real quick. We'll just talk about, again, just revisiting what we've discussed in our last tutorial. Now for this tutorial, doing our calibration process, is specifically looking at the closed loop calibration process. This is going to be focusing on idle and part throttle cruise calibration. We're not going to worry about open loop, full throttle, power enrichment yet. We'll do that in the next tutorial. We're going to be taking a look here at the histogram called MAF closed loop and GM VE short-term fuel trim. This is going to be taking a look, these two histograms here are going to be allowing us to take a look at the calibration method to dial both airflow modes in at the same time. Now specifically, the GM VE closed loop, or the short-term fuel trim parameter, is that math channel that's going to be taking a look at what the mass airflow is reading. It's going to be taking a look at what we have to modify based on the short-term fuel trims. And then it's going to also take a look at how far the volumetric efficiency airflow here is off from the mass airflow. And then the percentage of change that we need to actually update our virtual volumetric efficiency table by, so that the mass airflow is dialed in properly based on what our fuel trims are showing, that our volumetric efficiency airflow here is dialed in properly in conjunction with the mass airflow. We want them to match very closely. So the dynamic airflow channel here is going to be trailing and tracking both of those airflow modes, and we should find almost no difference between them in terms of the mass airflow and the volumetric efficiency airflow. We should find that they're pretty much spot on to each other. That improves our transient fueling, transient driving, and improves our torque calculation, and improves how the vehicle drives, how the vehicle shifts with an automatic transmission, all things that we want to accomplish. We can really get our airflow models and modes dialed in properly without completely separating the airflow mode. So we don't have to put it into a MAF failed speed density. We don't have to put it into high speed mode with the mass airflow, as we already discussed in our previous training modules looking at the closed loop calibration process. So what we're doing here is, again, just combining both of them together. So by using these two histograms, by populating the data in here, we'll be already essentially 2 steps ahead of the curve, because we can do 2 things at once. And it doesn't require us to go constantly flash back and forth between the airflow modes when we're doing the calibration. Now, if we just go peek behind the scenes, part of what makes this work is going to be heavily relying on the filters. So the filters that we have built in here are going to be taking at the transient throttle movements at a rate of change over time. We're filtering out any kind of throttle movements. We're also filtering out gear shifts. So we're ignoring a certain period of time before or after a gear shift in our data log. And then we also are going to require ourselves to be in fuel trim modes that are going to be consistent with closed loop behavior. We don't want to go in and take any open loop behavior and include that in looking at the short-term fuel trim. Let's just relabel this, call this closed loop, so it's going to just look like everything else here. So closed loop, open loop. We want our GMVE closed loop parameter here being specific to closed loop conditions. So the filters are going to really make this happen. Mass airflow, we have our filters in place. Same filters, actually. The same filters are going to be in place. So these are the 2 histograms we're going to work with, and the filtering is going to make the difference here, all the difference in making this plot data, because we need to calibrate these 2 different airflow modes in steady state conditions. So we're filtering out any transient type of conditions in our throttle movement. We're filtering out any kind of non-closed loop fuel trim behavior, and we're also filtering out any kind of gear shifts that happen, specifically looking at the automatic transmission gear shifts. So that should be plenty of filters. We should have good, reliable, steady state data from this, and we can rely on that for our calibration process. Now, a few additional things here. In the last tutorial, I did mention that we had the ability to not have to disable our long-term fuel trims in our calibration file if we didn't want to. Now, I've done that already in my file, which we're going to take a look at here in just a few minutes. But if I key on the car here and connect to the VCM scanner, let's go power on the vehicle, we have the ability here, if I go into connect, we have this tab right here called special functions. And I briefly mentioned this way earlier in the training modules, training course. We had a overview of the VCM scanner.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.